Hello, this is the Green Corn Rebellion Show. I'm Gregory Harden II. Today I'm here with Wesley Forbes, who is running for Congress in Oklahoma's 4th District against Tom Cole. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I've had a long day, worked, call time, but I'm still alive, still running.
All right. So, first question I have is where are you from and where did you grow up?
I was born in Tulsa, and so I spent a lot of my life there, about half my life, my youngest years there. Then I moved to a rural small town, Porter, Oklahoma, about 50 miles out of Tulsa, and that's where I ended up growing up, graduating high school. Um, And after high school, I went to Norman for the first time to attend OU, and I've been here ever since.
All right. Could you tell me a little bit more about your childhood and your upbringing?
All right, living in Tulsa, I was mostly just I was from a low income family, so a lot of it was living in apartments, trailers, stuff like that, kind of moving around often. When I was at my youngest years, it was pretty bad off. We moved to Tahlequah for a bit. We had a moment of homelessness. Then my mom got a degree in teaching, and she was able to afford to have us have a roof over our head, and for a bit. And so we spent most of it just kind of skating by. I was raised mostly by her, single parents, on a teacher's salary. So it was it was kind of always like playing jump rope with the poverty line a bit. Just depending on how things went. That's how things were. And so I moved around a lot because my mom would move schools a lot, but eventually she stuck in Tulsa Public Schools. Um, and from there, it was mostly just growing up, going to school, and just trying to get used to moving around a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But as I settled in, we finally kind of centered at one spot. We stayed in Porter for a while, and there it was mostly just trying to attend school, get the education needed to, better myself and avoid trying to be a product of your environment at that point. And I got to high school, really hit my groove, stayed around long enough to have longer lasting friendships. Academic team, a few sports I was playing. I played football for a little bit, played baseball for a little bit, life smarts, stuff like that. And eventually, I would get involved in more. I try to not to say nerdy anymore because I feel like that word's kind of lost its meaning nowadays because everything's nerdy at this point. But
Yeah.
I started getting into things like D&D and fantasy settings, like book series. And from there, that kind of carried off into college, where that was most of my focus, like outside of school.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always tried my hand at writing. I actually wanted to be a writer when I grew up for the longest time. And yeah, other than that, school started and I hit the political scene, started getting involved with OU College Democrats, started volunteering for environmental issues, for youth advocacy issues, and mass incarceration issues, like stuff like that, criminal justice reform.
Mm-hmm.
And here we are.
All right. So, what made you interested in politics?
Um, Knowing how it affected our lives, or my life, my family's life. Like I said, I'm from a low income family, and we grew up often relying on social programs such as, SNAP. When I was younger, my mom was on WIC. We had LIHEAP. At one point, we were on HUD, I think. And so I just knew that those issues impacted my livelihood. And I knew that a lot of people would campaign openly on cutting those programs. They'd
Mm-hmm.
openly degrade anyone who relied on those programs. I'm sure you've heard of the welfare queen.
Yeah.
That stuff. My mom was called a welfare queen by her own brother once. Yeah, it's toxic, and so I always just knew that it was a serious thing. And so when I graduated college, I knew that's where I wanted to help. I work with the Department of Human Services now, with the LIHEAP program,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just it's always been a serious issue to me. Social programs, the social safety net, and I've always wanted to protect it because I know that there are people like me who need that to survive. So that was the biggest thing that brought me in. But there's also, the environmental issue, the climate change.
Yeah.
I'm afraid that our generation is going to be the first one that doesn't get to grow old. I've been saying that for a while now, and it's true because it scares me.
Yeah.
If we don't fix the problems now, that's it. And both of those issues, they matter a lot to young people. The social programs are often used by students. The environmental issues, we're going to inherit the earth
Yeah.
when this next generation finally passes the torch. And so it's a no-brainer. You have to get the youth involved because they need a seat at the table because they are going to inherit this mess and they should start leading now.
Mm-hmm.
So all of those combined kind of brought me in.
All right. So do you support Medicare for all?
Yes, I do.
All right. Could you explain your support for Medicare for all?
Sure. So I don't want to always just bring it back to being in a low income background, but anyone who's ever struggled with money understands how devastating it can be financially when you get sick. And no one deserves to go bankrupt just because they're sick. No one deserves to go bankrupt because they have a heart attack or because they get cancer. I have family members right now, actually, my aunt. She was diagnosed with terminal bone cancer, and she went years having the same problems and never going to the doctor because she couldn't afford it. If she's not wealthy, and so we need a single payer system that can cover the costs for our healthcare so that we can, do like every other developed nation does and take care of our sick, because the insurance system that we have right now is inadequate. It doesn't cover everybody. No one can afford it. And unless you get a job that has benefits, but those are dying out.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we need a single payer Medicare for all system.
All right. So on your platform, you talk about family-owned farms. You say that you want to establish a disaster coverage fund for farmers to be able to rebuild if there's ever a natural disaster. You also say you'll advocate for legislation that will protect them from being financially exploited. Does that mean that you're also in favor of breaking up big agricultural businesses that make it
Definitely in
harder
favor.
for? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's corporations like Tyson that pretty much dominates, like, the chicken industry, agricultural industry. Then there's like Monsanto. I'm sure anyone who started Monsanto knows exactly all the things they do wrong.
Yeah.
And those two are probably the two most guilty of exploiting family-owned farms in small towns and agricultural areas around them. And as someone who was raised in Porter, Oklahoma, the peach capital of Oklahoma, and who has worked on peach orchards and stuff like that, I know that the farmers in Oklahoma are good people. They're hardworking. They just want to get by,
Mm-hmm.
and oftentimes they're exploited by a business trying to come in and capitalize on their labor, to find some way to sneak around to get their land for cheap. I'm sure you've heard of Monsanto planting their own seeds
Yeah.
in a farmer's land and then suing them for their land.
Yeah.
That's not uncommon. That's happened in Porter.
Wow.
And yeah, I'm sure it's happened in CD4 plenty of times. So yeah, we need to do a lot of things to help the rural and agricultural community get by, because at this point, it's mostly not even family farms anymore. It's mostly massive corporations who
Yeah.
contract out work to farmhands, who they pay pennies, and they get no benefits. They get no special treatment. They're just paid minimum wage, and the animals are treated poorly. The farms are poorly ran, and it makes it inefficient. It makes it dangerous to the health of the workers, and it economically screws a lot of Americans.
Yeah. And you support a $15 minimum wage, correct?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
All right.
Yeah, I've
Uh,
been a wage worker for most of my adult life. $7.25 doesn't do it. And honestly, I go more than just wanting to raise the minimum wage to $15. I
Mm-hmm.
want to make it to where, so the problem with the minimum wage as we handle it is that it becomes politicized. It
Mm-hmm.
becomes, the Republicans are like, oh, if you raise minimum wage, businesses will shit the bed. But
Yeah.
sorry, I don't know if it's okay to cuss on your show.
You're good. You're good. You're good.
But and then the Democrats are like, yeah, people deserve to be, to live. They deserve to be paid proportionally for their labor. And so it ends up being a tug of war between the two. But other nations, they do another system where it's decided by committee every year based on like inflation, prices of goods, etc. And it's a expert committee who comes in, evaluates the situations, and decides then to raise or lower. Well, usually just raising.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to have implemented so that we can stop going 10 years. What was it, like 15 years since the minimum wage was put to 725?
I
Around
think
that.
it's about 13 years, somewhere in there.
In the
2007, I
meantime,
think.
prices of goods have like increased by at least 25%, maybe double. And it's just not an efficient system. It ends up making the financial situation of all of America a pawn in the political game. And so we need a committee that yearly decides to adjust it proportionately to economic factors.
All right. I like that idea. Um, and you also support paid medical leave. Could you talk about the importance of that?
So back to me being a wage worker in like the food industry, it was often a problem for most people that you'd go to work sick because you can't
Yeah.
afford to miss a day off, and you can't also afford to go pay a doctor just to look at you to tell you something you already know. Essentially,
Yeah.
like, yeah, doctor, I have the cold. All right, that's $50. Yeah, you're right. You have a cold. Don't go to work for another week. And so we need to have medical leave so that people can afford to be sick because it's not something you can avoid.
Yeah.
Honestly, healthcare in itself it shouldn't have, it needs to be socially protected. It needs to have social programs around it because it's incompatible with capitalist structure. When you're having a heart attack, you can't weigh the pros and cons of going to this hospital or that hospital. You go to the nearest one, right? So
Hmm.
you can't haggle for prices like I'm having a stroke. Can you fix me for 1,000?
Yeah.
You can't do that. And so even at the lower levels where you're just a worker, you have the flu, and you need to just spend the day in bed, suffering silently while you try to cure yourself.
Yeah.
People will go into work with the flu because they can't afford to miss work, or they're afraid if they miss work they'll get fired.
Tired. Yeah.
And going to the doctor is so expensive already, and inherently in a country that doesn't have Medicare for all, assured medical assistance for everyone, having someone get a doctor's note every time they're sick so that they don't get fired for not going to work is classist.
Yeah.
So if it's basically anyone who can't afford to go to a doctor has to go to work sick, making other people sick, usually other poor people who can't afford to go to the doctor, and it's just a cycle of coughing and sneezing and medical debt.
Yeah. Let's see. And you support the Green New Deal?
Yes, sir.
All
We
right.
need the environmental issues that we're facing, the climate change that's looming over us is only going to be solved if we dedicate massive national resources to solve the problem. At every level, we're going to need to fight this. I'm sure you've heard the statement, it's going to be like mobilizing for war. And that's what it's going to have to be to fight climate change, to stop the worst from happening. That's going to start happening soon. So unequivocally, I support the Green New Deal because we need bold action now.
All right. And you support criminal justice reform and ending mandatory minimum sentences. Do you also support the legalization of marijuana?
Not only do I support the legalization of marijuana, I support the legalization of all illicit substances. I know that might be pretty controversial in Oklahoma. Marijuana is just now getting on the ticket to be recreationally, or people are just now coming around to it.
Yeah.
But heroin, meth, cocaine, all of those issues are not going to be solved. The abuse of those drugs is not going to be solved by prohibition. It's going to be solved by rehabilitation, addiction treatment.
Yes.
And that's especially important in the rural community that's being destroyed by those addictions. So, yeah, I support legalization of all these substances. I want to focus on rehabilitation. I want to focus on treatment. Because
All right.
throwing people in prison isn't going to solve anything.
That's perfect. And last question I have here is, who are some of your favorite bands? I remember you were telling me that you're into heavy metal.
All right, so heavy metal, I kind of go into specific genres because I've just listened to so much over the years. So like, there's industrial metal that I really like
Okay.
Rammstein. There's
Yeah.
Marilyn Manson. I really like those. That's what got me into it. I remember the first heavy metal songs that I started listening to were those of Ozzy Osbourne.
Oh
He's
yeah.
what got me into it, and it's just been growing then over and over. And then eventually, one of my oldest friends, Colton, he got me into power metal.
hmm
And
Like
there's
Sabaton,
what was that?
like Sabaton, stuff like
Sabaton is
that.
actually my favorite band.
Oh,
I actually have
nice.
So their newer songs are my favorite, especially their last song, their last album rather, the Great War. But beyond Sabaton, there's like Blind Guardian, there's Sonata Arctica. Well, they're older stuff. Sonata Arctica. There's a Stradivarius, and then there's like the ones that everyone knows about, like Dragon Force for
Yeah.
power metal. Power
Yeah.
metal is probably my centerfold genre. But I listen to a wide variety. I know a few bands that I would kind of consider like melodic death metal.
Like In
So
Flames.
like In Flames is my friend Colton that I mentioned earlier, and I have a friend named Trevor who really like In Flames. I like some of their songs.
Yeah.
I am more into I'm maybe Insomnium, if you know about them. And then there's I don't know if Amorphous really fits in that genre though, but they're pretty similar too. And yeah, what about you, man? I'm interested
Uh,
in your musical tastes.
well, as you can tell, Limp Bizkit. That's one of my
Yeah,
favorite bands.
I see you posts tweeting about that a lot. So
Yeah. Slipknot,
cool.
Linkin Park, at least their earlier stuff that was
Yeah,
metal. Chevelle, who else? Amir, Butcher Babies, Bad Wolves, Breaking Benjamin stuff. Like I like a lot of like the majority of my like favorite bands are more of like the radio metal type bands, the stuff that you hear on the radio a lot. But I like a lot of the other stuff that you don't hear on the radio a lot. Like I like quite a bit of metalcore. Like I like Hatebreed,
cool.
Killswitch Engage, stuff like that. So yeah, I'm kind of all over the place, but I would say like my favorite heavy metal genre is definitely new metal.
Okay.
Like Korn and Slipknot, stuff like that. So yeah.
Yeah, I think Linkin Park was probably the first band that I ever was just like obsessed over.
Yeah.
It was I kind of go when I think of the music that I've listened to the most, it always involves like one band that I just every song that they ever make is just a banger, and I
Mhm.
just can't pull away from it. Linkin Park was probably the first band for me to have that experience with.
Yeah.
Like in the end, Numb. Yeah, it's I'm trying to think of this one lesser known song that they had. It was about like putting your body over like the machine, the cogs of the system to stop it.
Wretches and Kings, I think is what it's called. I know
Can
what
you
you're
say that?
something like that. Oh, hold on, I have it on.
Wretches and Cages. I think that I
No,
do remember that.
no, Wretches and hold up. I know what song you're talking about. I just have to think of the name. Wretches and Kings off of
Okay,
Thousand
Wretches and
Suns.
Kings. Okay,
Yeah,
yeah, that
yeah,
one. It was they spoke because of that line specifically. It's just like, oh yeah, fuck the system, Rage Against the Machine. I love it.
yeah.
So
Um, yeah, Linkin Park. That's probably my favorite band. I was really sad when Chester died a couple of
yeah.
years ago. Um, but yeah, and what bands have you seen live?
So most of the bands that I've seen live are power metal bands. Sabaton, I've seen them a few times. They went to Kane's Ballroom in Tulsa not too long ago. Then I've seen them in Texas a couple times. Then there's bands like Battle Beast. That's another power metal band. I've seen them a couple times. Camelot. I saw Camelot live. At the same time, I saw Battle Beast. Let's see. Blind Guardian a couple times. Gravedigger. That's about it. I think I saw Trivium. I saw Trivium live. Yeah.
Nice.
Really big fan of Trivium. What is it? Empire? I think that's my favorite song from them.
Oh yeah, my favorite Trivium song is probably Strife. That's a good one. Yeah, I've seen Trans-Siberian Orchestra. That was the first band I ever saw live. That was like when I was like 12, 13 years old. And a few years ago at Cat Fest, I saw Chevelle and Korn and Avatar, Gemini Syndrome.
Cool.
And
what's Korn like live?
Korn, oh, they're great. It was really great. Like, it was everything I imagined and more.
I hope I get to see them sometime live because I imagine that's a trip. So.
Did it? Yeah, and I've seen, who else? I went to Cat Fest last year. I saw Bad Wolves, and have you heard of the band Bad Wolves?
Aren't they the ones that covered
Zombie?
Yeah.
Yeah, I had their guitarist come on my show a few months ago.
Oh, really? Awesome.
Yeah.
I gotta check that one out.
Yeah, and I saw them at Cat Fest. Marilyn Manson.
Cool.
Candlebox. Who else? Santa Sonia. You know, Adam Gonti's new band with Mike of Stained.
They had this one song that came out not too long ago that I listened to a lot. It was I think it was like
Santa Sonia? You talk about Santa Sonia or Stained?
Yeah.
Santa Sonia? The Haunted. It was probably The Haunted. That was like their huge song last year.
It wasn't last year. It was a lot longer than that.
Okay.
I was like I think I was a freshman in college when.
Okay. Okay. I think I know which song you're talking about. You're probably talking about Better Place.
Better. Let me.
That was like the first.
I have a computer right here. I'm gonna look it up because it's killing me now.
I want to say it was probably Better Place or Let Me Live My Life. One of those two. That was the two big songs off of that album. That first album they put out back in 2015. I was still in high school then.
I think Santa Sonia or A Better Place.
Yeah,
I think that is it. But I remember Foo Fighters. I can't believe I didn't mention Foo Fighters. I loved Foo Fighters.
Oh yeah, they're great too. And I've also seen the band Issues. Have you heard of the band Issues?
Actually, I haven't.
They're great. They're like a metalcore band, but they're also like R&B and kind of like jazz too. They're really great. And I've seen them, but yeah.
I can listen to them sometime.
Yeah. But those are and then in a couple of months, I'm going to see Sepultura with a friend, and I'm going to see Black Veil Brides and In This Moment.
Oh, cool.
So yeah. Good stuff.
Yeah. It's nice to always talk to someone else who's into heavy metal or just any kind of metal genre because we're kind of few and far between, especially here in Oklahoma. So
yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on. Where can we find you on social media, and what's your campaign website?
My campaign website is Wesley Forbes for Congress or just wesleyforbes.com.
All right. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you.